He grew up in one of the toughest sections of one of America's most dangerous cities. He's a former Las Vegas Metro police officer, a retired ATF agent, and an author of multiple books. And he's here to talk about his experience on scene and afterwards at one of the most disastrous hotel fires in American history. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. Calling us from one of my favorite parts of the United States, Tucson, Arizona, we have Mark Rusin on the phone. Mark is a former Las Vegas Metro police officer, a retired ATF agent. He's also an author of multiple books, one of which is Metro Sin City Chronicles. We'll talk about that more. Mark, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Hey, thank you, John Jay. Pleasure.
It's a good thing to have you here. You come highly recommended. You've got such a great backstory. Be honest with you, one of the purposes of the Law Enforcement Today show, two main purposes. One is to give a glimpse behind the badge, why officers do what they do, what happens on scene. And we're going to talk about your experiences at the MGM Grand Fire. And the other one is also to talk about how people, law enforcement officers, family members, spouses, friends, other first responders, military veterans, victims of crime, go through traumatic incidents and how they reclaim their lives and build their lives afterwards. And your story kind of covers both, doesn't it?
It does. I've been involved in, several traumatic experiences as a first responder in Las Vegas, obviously, and then working the Strip. And then, like you said, the MGM Grand Fire, which I helped pull 87 bodies out of that fire back in 1980, along with, being shot at and almost being knifed and you name it, all the things that come with being a police officer in a vibrant city like Las Vegas and working the Strip. So, and then I followed that up after 4 years in uniform to be a ATF agent, and I was involved in several different cases and different situations there in a 24-year career before I retired in 2007. So, yeah, I got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, the ATF gig is not an easy desk gig. It might be for some people, but I worked with ATF agents on the streets. Them and the DEA, they were on the streets all the time.
Yeah, we pride ourselves on standing shoulder to shoulder with the state and local police officers, and we're not like the FBI where we feel we're above the state and locals. We're right in there with you. We get right in the hole at the bombing scenes and the arsons, and we'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you in your investigative process, and we won't let you hold a leaky bag once we leave town. So we're kind of on the team with you, and that's a good reputation to have. And I think it's because a lot of our agents were former police officers, and they know where the rubber meets the road, and they understand the situation totally. So that's why I think it's like that.
You're 100% correct. That's always been my opinion of DEA and ATF, and we've had many of both on the show. Before we get into the MGM Grand, we want to talk a little bit about Mark's childhood, because it's important and it kind of contradicts a lot of what you hear, especially in Hollywood. But a lot of ATF agents, a lot of DEA agents are severely injured in the line of duty. They work hazardous situations. And we all know city cops, and not just city. I had that mistaken idea in my head that we had it rough in a city, and the county guys, when I say guys, men and women, they had it easy. They didn't. There's a lot less of them, and they had to do everything. So they encountered as much stuff, maybe not as frequently, but it was also very, very dangerous for them as well.
Well, sure, because they have less backup. I mean, if you're in a city, major city, you can call a 444 on your radio and you got 25 cops rolling your way. But if you're out in a remote area, you're by yourself and you've got to do what you got to do. And it could be a little dicey at times, especially when you're when you're overpowered by two people or three or what have you. So, yeah, that's always an issue, and you wish you could have some help, the cavalry coming a little bit quicker when you're out there in the remote areas. But that's the difference between the sheriff's department and a lot of places and the local PDs.
Absolutely. And for them, backup's a long ways away many, many times. I want to go back to your childhood. You grew up in one of the toughest areas of one of America's roughest cities. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago on the south side, right near Midway Airport. And I tell in my book about my first encounter with the Chicago Police Department, where I was the victim of a robbery, attempt robbery, where I was grabbed on my paper route when I was 11 by a man and a guy that came at me with a knife to try and steal my $73 of hard-earned money that I had, earned on my paper route. And the light went off in my head, and I snapped, and I fought both of these guys off. And I tell the story about that, and the police responded, and I got to ride in a squad car to go look for these two assailants. And obviously, they were long gone, but that was my first brush with the police, and I thought it was cool. And back then, I was 11. It was 1966. And, Adam 12 was on TV and Dragnet and all those cool cop shows that I used to watch and was intrigued by. So that kind of started the fire in me to get me interested in law enforcement, along with playing hockey as a kid and being a sports nut from Chicago. So that's kind of how I started. And I followed my dream through college when I went to Western Illinois, and I majored in law enforcement administration. And then when I got out of school, in '77, there was a freeze on hiring at the federal level with President Carter just coming into the presidency, and I ended up taking a gambling junket to Vegas and working out to get on the police department out in Las Vegas, which was a good move and an exciting move for me at that time. So that was my
kind of
real
a natural move, because Hollywood's correct, and quite often or not, there was a heavy involvement of the Chicago mob in the gambling facilities in Vegas. So for you, going down there is not a big stretch.
That's true. In fact, when I first got there, a lot of people were looking at me with a little bit of a hairy eyeball, because they didn't know if I was, connected or what, being on the police department, coming from Chicago with Tony Spilotro back in those days, running the crime syndicate out of Chicago and Vegas, like you said. And the movie Casino, hit the nail on the head. I was working the Strip those nights when all that stuff happened in the movie, if you recall, and the Hole in the Wall gang and that whole crew was from Chicago. So, yeah, it was a Chicago connection, really deep. And then when Spilotro got whacked, like in the mid-'80s, then Las Vegas changed to more of a corporate entity, and those old places got knocked down, and corporate took over. So
all I've ever known is the corporate era of Las Vegas. I've only been there once, and I want to take my wife there again. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big gambler. I like playing poker with people I know, the social aspect of it. And yeah, the gambling part is fine, but it's about the nightlife there, the restaurants, the shows, everything you want is available in Las Vegas. And you're absolutely right about the movie Casino. It's one of the good ones about the mob based out of Chicago and their influence in Las Vegas. This is Law Enforcement Show. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Think of Facebook as the world's largest marketing platform, and most of their features are free. Facebook has more than 3 billion users worldwide, and more than 68% of them use the platform every day. Learn how to work smarter and get maximum engagement. Plus, many people can earn a monthly income from Meta. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Return conversation with Mark Rusin on the Law Enforcement, originally from Chicago. He is a former Las Vegas Metro Police, retired ATF, author of, I think, 2 books, one of which is called Metro Sin City Chronicles. Do a search on Amazon, you'll find it, and we're going to talk about that because that book really talks about your formative years in Chicago and then your street cop days in Las Vegas. Am I correct?
Absolutely. That's what it's all about up until I leave Las Vegas to become an ATF agent.
So you said earlier in the conversation, growing up in Chicago, you got robbed, and that kind of inspired you to want to pursue a career in law enforcement. And of course, the old TV shows at the time, Adam 12, Dragnet, all of those. I'm sure the old Joseph Wambaugh movies and television shows influenced you as well, because they did me. Made you decide that was a career choice you wanted. And you went on a junket, a trip to Vegas, and decided, hey, I'm going to start a job in law enforcement here. How did that happen?
Well, what happened was in '78, I was working as a bouncer in a nightclub. It was a mobbed-up nightclub in Chicago. And what happened was one of the guys that was frequenting the joint came in, and he was a Chicago fireman going through a divorce, and he said he had a free ticket to go to Vegas and stay at the MGM Grand. And I jumped at it, and because I'd never been to Vegas at the time. And when we got there, we went to the Riviera to play blackjack, and I ended up hitting it off with one of the blackjack dealers, this cute little Italian girl, and one thing led to another, and we went out for drinks, and she told me that the police department was hiring there. So I ended up sending her my address and everything, giving her my address, and I was able to contact the police department, send them my resume and everything, and go out there for the testing and all that stuff. And it was a good feeling to go out there because I had my degree and I wanted to be a cop so bad, and I really wanted to get on in Chicago Police Department. So I ended up going to Vegas, and I figured that I could work uniform for a while, and then if the feds ever started hiring again, I had my sights set on ATF once they started hiring again. So that's kind of how it all started.
Earlier in the conversation, you said that when you got to Vegas and you were working a street, you're working a strip area, and it was a time when Vegas was starting to transition from the mob influence, Chicago mob influence, to the more corporate influence, but people looked at you kind of like with we call it the stink eye. They like, we're not quite sure about this guy. Where does he fit in the picture? Yeah,
exactly. It was the hairy eyeball, we called it in Chicago. But anyway, yeah, same thing. People weren't sure about my motives, and I was pure as can be. You know, I just was a young kid wanting to be a cop, and it was kind of funny because I went through a couple things, and I spell out in the book how they kind of harassed me a little bit to check me and to see if I was on the up and up, so to speak. And I passed the test with flying colors, and I did gain some respect along the way. But yeah, they were unfair to me a little bit, trying to set me up and trying to weed me out, so to speak. And I passed all the tests, and then it finally dawned on them that I was the real deal, and I was there to do a job and not a plant or not anything else. So.
Now, I'm not a historian, and I don't know Vegas history all that well, but I do know that right now, and for the last many years, they have a sterling reputation as a great law enforcement agency. However, around the 70s, there was a lot of problems with corruption and other things. Did you see any of that?
Not really. They incorporated the city and the county into one in 73. And I came on the job in 1980. So we were on the up and up. I mean, I had been, offered bribes and on traffic stops like Chicago is noted for. And, of course, you don't take them and you warn the people that this is not, not Chicago or not New York where that type of stuff is prevalent. But no, I really didn't. I was proud to be a Las Vegas police officer, and I still to this day think it's one of the finest, police departments in the country. Like you said, they have great training. They have they're on the up and up, and they run the streets. They don't take any off of anybody. And it was fun to be a Las Vegas police officer, and I cherished those 4 years, and I learned a lot, and I had a lot of fun. So it was good. It was really good to be a Las Vegas Metro police officer.
Earlier you mentioned 1980. I started the Baltimore Police Department in October 1980, so I'm a geezer like you in some respects.
Yeah.
And it was a different era, and some people, and I just laugh, and, look, if the label fits, I'll wear it, but they consider me, a knuckle-dragging Neanderthal when it comes to policing. But that's the way everybody was when I was on the job, so I'm not an oddity. But you mentioned 1980, and in, I believe it was November 1980, the third deadliest hotel fire in the history of the United States took place in Las Vegas. That was at the MGM Grand, and I do remember bits of it because it was a long time ago. You have a different perspective because you were there.
I was there, and when the fire broke out in the morning, we had just finished doing some raids on the west side of town, and the sergeant, and I note this in a chapter in my book that actually is on Wikipedia as well under the MGM Grand Hotel fire. If you ever Google that, you'll see the story. But, the sergeant stated that the MGM was on fire, and we thought he was kidding or crazy, and we ran to the back of the building, and we looked up, and there was smoke all over the strip, and we were told to go home and get some rest because we might be called back that night. And my squad was chosen. I had a 10-man squad chosen to go into the building and recover dead bodies. So that was our chore for the evening. And I go into detail in my story about seeing all these dead people lined up in the hallways and the looks on their faces, and when you die, when you're sucking for air, what it looks like on your face, and your face actually stays that way. And I describe in detail some of the faces and some of the looks and how that affected me. And I was just totally overwhelmed, both psychologically and emotionally that
Absolutely.
Evening, because I had never seen anything like that, never been involved in anything like that.
Nothing can prepare you for that. There's nothing in the academy that teaches you how to deal with that.
No.
It's one of those deals where and I've never had to do this. I've had my own fair share of traumas, just like other police, and you see things, and you're absolutely right. It's not like Hollywood. It's not like television. It's not like a TV show where someone dies and it looks like they're sleeping. The actor's asleep. It's not like that. It's a horrible thing. And a lot of these images get imprinted on your brain, and it's something you can't really quite get rid of, and they pop up at the weirdest time. We are talking with Mark Rusin. He is an author of 2 books. He's a former Las Vegas Metro police officer, retired ATF agent. When we return to the Law Enforcement Today show, we're going to talk more about the MGM Grand Fire and his responsibilities and what he and his squad mates did that day. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast.
Imagine earning an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more from the comfort of your home or business, all with Facebook. That's right. Meta is paying people just like you every month. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
This is the Law Enforcement Show. We return our conversation with Mark Rusin, a retired ATF agent, former Las Vegas Metro police officer, originally from Chicago, author of 2 books. We'll talk about his books in a moment. Before we went to break, you started talking about November 21st, 1980, the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino fire. I believe it was somewhere between 85 or 87 people died that day.
87 people when it was all ended. 87 was the number.
And when you got there earlier in the day, they sent you home and said, be prepared because you have to deal with this later on. Is that correct?
Yeah, they sent us home to get some rest because we just worked some warrants. We did our 10-hour shift on the west side of town. So when we got there, the fire actually broke out around 7:05 in the morning, and we were just getting off shift, so we went home to sleep, and then we got called back at 3 o'clock to work a double that afternoon. So by the time my squad all got back, we were dealing with known deaths, and people jumpers and helicopter rooftop saves and stuff like that. But the people that were still in the building were all presumed dead, because obviously they would have got out. They would have been dead of smoke inhalation up the top floors of the building, which they were. And my squad was chosen to go in with an axe and a flashlight, because it was all pitch black in there, and go in and break down doors and start pulling bodies out of the rooms and start to find identification and personal belongings and tag them with the right people, so that we could put them in the bags and take them back to the helicopter from the rooftop, and then go to the morgue to sort it out. And that's what my squad was doing. And it was amazing. And in the story, I say when we lifted off via helicopter from the east lot of the blackened out MGM, when we got to the top, it looked like a burnt out tenement in the middle of a large carnival, which is what it looked like to me from the top. And when we landed on the rooftop, I was told that they needed 7 gurneys down on the 19th floor, and I wasn't even sure how far that was. But I started walking, and when I got to the 19th floor, I started to walk over the 7 bodies that were laying in the hallway, and trying not to trip over them as I was carrying a gurney to the staging area, which was at the elevator. So then we had to start to, the process of what we called tagging and bagging the dead bodies. And I saw this one lady who looked like my mom, actually, and my mom was back in Chicago at the time. And she had this look of horror on her face, and she had glasses on, and her glass was broken like a spider web, one of the lenses. And it just hit me, and I was like, this is somebody's mom, back somewhere in this country that I'm now confirming the death. And it overwhelmed me for a moment. I had to take a minute, because I almost broke down, because like I said, you try not to, but you can't help it. And it's amazing how you're overcome by the emotion at the moment. And an overload, it's emotional overload. It's the best way I could explain it. And you have all these people lined up, and they're all dead, and they were all partying and having a good time, and they were laying in their bed, and all of a sudden the alarm went off or what have you, and they realized that they were in trouble, and they tried to get out, and they tried to get to the rooftop, and they were overcome by smoke, and they died in their hotel rooms, and the look of horror on their face was just amazing. And I also had one guy who had the presence of mind, and I say in his dying mind's frenzy, he actually took his bed sheets off the bed and tied them end to end, thinking that he's going to do an escape rope. Now, this guy was on like the 20th floor, and he's going to, basically shimmy down to the escape rope that he's made. He's got the bed sheets tied together. He's got the pillowcases tied together, and he's got them clenched in his fist. And I called it his escape rope. He threw a chair through the window, and he was getting ready to shimmy down, from floor to floor, thinking he could get out that way. And he died right inside of his room there with this look of horror on his face. And I'll never forget that. And he was 55 years old. And those things stick with you. And you talk about what you see, you can't unsee, and that's the unfortunate part about it. And to this day, I mean, I had night sweats and daydreams or daymares, what we call them, and you name it, for years after that. And to this day, around November of every year, I say a prayer, and I get back on Google, and I do the MGM Grand Fire almost like as a memento to me, as to remember where I was, and I say a prayer for the families of the deceased. So
one of the things that really strikes me about this, and there's many things that are overwhelming about it, is I can't imagine going home and trying to rest knowing what I had to face when I came in that evening or that afternoon. You and your squad knew what was ahead of you. I mean, you may not have known how advanced the crime scene, for lack of better words, again, was, or how many dead people there were, but you knew it was going to be bad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. There was no laughter. There was no, it wasn't fun. We were on the helicopter, three of us together, and the helicopters were lifting us off. And no, we were dead serious. We knew what we were up against, and it wasn't fun. I call it the night from hell, or the Twilight Zone night, and that's kind of like what I thought when I looked down the hallway and I saw all these dead bodies and, all these flashlights and what have you lighting up the hallway. The whole hotel was blacked out. And I want to tell you about one other couple that I ended up going up to about the 24th floor. And when I broke the door down, the safety latch was on it, which is a bad sign, because, there's either somebody still inside or they jumped out the window to their death, and either way, it's not good. So I actually broke down the door through the safety latch, and I found a couple in their 20s embraced in bed. They were still sleeping in bed. And I saw her gown at the end of the bed, and I saw this picture of this beautiful young couple on a table, and a bouquet of red roses that was soot-covered red roses. That's how bad the smoke was up on the 20th floor, 23rd floor. And I stopped for a moment, because I knew I was going to have to break these two people apart and put them in body bags. And it was so emotional for me that I picked up their picture and I broke down. I started to cry, and I couldn't stop. I just started to cry, and I was just totally overloaded with emotion. And I knew their family was back east somewhere, hoping that they were okay, because you have to understand, I mean, this is like 15 hours after the fire broke out. It made national news. Everybody knows what's going on. And they haven't heard from their loved ones yet. And here I am, Officer Rusin, walking into their room, and I'm confirming, the deaths of their kids, and it just took me so emotional. It got me so emotional that I broke down. And the funny thing about it, well, not funny, but the sad thing about it was, I had to be macho. I couldn't let my partner see me cry. You can't do that. You can't break down on the job and get in a fetal position in the corner. You got a job to do. So I had to suck it up and try and, compose myself as I'm breaking these two people apart, putting them in bags. And I even say, I wish I had one great big body bag to put them both in it together, because that's where they belonged, and it was emotional as
You're absolutely right about we policed in an environment, I say we, me and you, a lot of other people, and some still today, where the mentality was suck it up, buttercup. If you're going to cry, you cry in your patrol car when your job is done. And quite often it was while heading to another call. We're going to return to our conversation with Mark Rusin about the MGM Grand Fire, the day, and the long-term effects. This is the Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. There's only one official Facebook page for the show. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to click like.
Do this quick test. Go to a job recruiting website and type in social media marketing and see how many jobs there are and what they are paying. Facebook alone has more than 3 billion registered users, and studies show that more than 68% of them use it every month. Learn how to use Facebook to significantly increase your reach, and you could earn an extra revenue source from Meta too, like I do. To do that, you need to know what to do and what not to do. Get step-by-step directions and tips. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Turn conversation with Mark Rusin, calling us from Tucson, Arizona. Mark is a very interesting personality. First of all, he's from Chicago originally. And when you hear Mark talk, I should say, when I listen to Mark talk, he's in terms like whacked and working at a mobbed up place as a bouncer when he's a kid and all that stuff. And I get an image in my mind of what Hollywood puts out there. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it happens. And then you were Las Vegas Metro Police for a few years. And early on in the job, on November, I believe, 21st, 1980, you're dispatched to the MGM Grand Fire where 87 people were killed. And you get there in the morning, and the bosses say, go home, get some rest, because you come back and you'll deal with this later on in the afternoon. I, number one, can't fathom what that's like to know bad things are heading your way, because in my career, the only time we knew ahead of time something could be bad is doing a raid. Everything else happened so fast, you didn't have time to really get fearful or react to it until afterwards. And yeah, I cried too, Mark. You're not alone there. And some of the images stay with me, even at my ripe old age. But I can't picture what it was like for you and your squad mates to say, this is what we're going into. And this could be literally hell on earth. And that's what it was.
It was absolutely that. And like I said, I have nightmares to this day, night sweats, whatever you call it. And it's one of those things that you just, it just takes your breath away when you think back and you realize, how did you get through it? You know, how did I get through it? I mean, I barely got through it. And my folks, they saw me on I guess I walked past a live feed on national news that night with my partner, and they saw me on TV that night for Chicago. They were watching, and they called me the next day to see how I was doing. And, you know, you want to protect your folks because they're worried enough that you're a cop in Vegas. And I told them that I was doing fine. You know, I lied to them on the phone because I didn't want them worrying any more than they're worrying already. And they saw what I was going through, and it was quite a traumatic deal, and a night that I'll never forget. And you know, some of the images that you see, like I said earlier, you can't unsee, and I'll never forget that. And you know, aside from other calls you go on when you're a first responder, you know, shootings and stabbings and all the other that you have to deal with in the horrific things that human beings do to one another that you have to witness. And this was an accidental situation, but just overload of dead bodies and trauma that they faced before they died. And you know what was going through their minds, and you know how they were trying to get to safety, and they just didn't make it. And it was an emotional deal, and something that, you know, I'll never forget.
Right. And I know that things have changed since then. A lot of regulations have changed. But I'll be honest with you, after this conversation, staying in a hotel, I will think differently about it. And here's another thing. How often have people like me been in a building at work or wherever it might be, and a fire alarm goes off and go, oh, it's probably just a routine test. Oh, it's a malfunction. Nothing to worry about. And then turns out it's not a malfunction. It's not a routine test. It's the worst case scenario, and you're 20 floors up. They really,
yeah.
You don't need to reply to this because it's upsetting. These people were trapped. They had nowhere to go.
Yeah, they were, and there were few jumpers too, and you know, they couldn't breathe, and they took the way out. They just ended up jumping off the balconies to their death, and it's just one of those things. You know, you could have been disoriented. You can't breathe. You're sucking for air, and you know you're going down, and you know, you fall over the railing or what have you, and it's one of those things. But yeah, there were a few of those, and just other people that, like I said, that were really sucking for air, and the air was it was thinner the higher up you got, obviously, but it was really thick, you know, throughout that whole building, and that's the toxins that kill the people, you know, which is the glue and the rugs and the
right.
paint and all that stuff that burns is what you become overcome with. The toxins is what kills you.
So 87 souls passed that day. My concern, obviously, for them and their families, you can't undo that. You can't make that right. But I also have a great deal of concern for all the first responders, including you and your teammates and squad mates that worked that day. How are they all doing, and how are you doing?
Well, like I said, it affected me. The closer to the situation, obviously, it's gotten better. Like time heals all wounds, you know, that saying, and I believe that. But like I said, there's an anniversary date that comes up every year, and it compelled me to write the story. And I actually wrote that rough draft of that story 10 years after the fact, because I was having some difficulty, waking up in the middle of the night and, my wife put her arm around me and say, "What's the matter?" And I would flash back to the faces of these people, or muzzle flash in the night, or a guy coming at, or a lady coming at me with a knife, or what have you, whatever things that cops go through, what they have to deal with. And so the bottom line is, as time has gone by, I think of it less and less, but around November, I think of it again, and that kind of, in a nice way, because I'm allowed to think back. And what I was getting to when I wrote the story, I felt better because it was almost therapeutic. It allowed me to vent about my emotions, about what I saw and what I felt. And I'm not ashamed or not afraid to tell somebody that I cried on the job. You could be a macho man, you could be a macho cop, but some of the things that you witness, some of the carnage and some of the that we put up with and we have to see, you can't unsee.
Right.
And those things, guys with their heads blown off, or domestic disturbances when people try and knife you or what have you, or muzzle flash in the middle of the night when it's not your gun. Those are things that you never forget. For the rest of your life, you remember that. And that's kind of what it is about law enforcement, and you can't unsee it. And it's one of those things where you just wish you could. You wish you could wave a magic wand and put it out of your mind, but you just can't do it.
And here we are.
That's the toll it takes.
We are survivors of this. I say we, not just you and me, but so many people have had a show. And I personally don't think anymore about, why me and why not them and all that. It's just is what it is. And like many people, I have my emotional scars and my physical scars as well. I'm sure you do too. And you've done a great job telling it. You said about 10 years after the fire, you decided to write a book, and the book is called Metro Sin City Chronicles. Do a search on Google for the book, or Mark Rusin books. It's Rusin, or just go to Amazon.com. Tell us about this book, because it's the first of two you wrote.
It is. It's actually the second book I wrote, and I started it when the MGM happened, obviously 10 years after the fact. That was my first chapter of the book. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to see if I had any potential as a writer, because I always enjoyed writing poetry when I was a kid and writing stories and stuff like that. And then, of course, you dictate. We dictated our police reports, and then they were transcribed, and then we could get a copy of it. I saved a lot of copies from different police calls I had gone on with the thought of maybe someday chronicling them and putting them together in a book like I did. But the MGM Grand story was on my mind for 10 years. So in 1990, I wrote the story in a rough draft form, and I showed it to my wife, and I showed it to some family members, and they all got the same emotion. They cried when they read the story, and it was only like 5 pages long. It was a short story. And so I thought I had something. And then at the 20th anniversary in 2000, I floated it to Oprah Winfrey and a few other, I was going to do that. And I got busy and I didn't do it. And then on the 25th anniversary, I finally did get it to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and they called me up and said they wanted to do a big spread on the 25th anniversary, and they started with that. And then it caught on, and then that article, like I said, is in Wikipedia under the MGM Grand Hotel fire. If you scroll down, you'll see my name, and then I think it says officer recalls eerie scene or something like that.
I'm so glad you did write the book, and I'm really glad you came on the show to tell us about it. As a matter of fact, we're going to be back again in the future because there's more stories to tell and more books. Mark, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, John.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or 2 or 3. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.